It's much a pleasure to be here and interacting with you all. Congratulations to the Bridge India for completing 4 years. And hello and welcome to the Bridge India's panel discussion on the occasion of International Day of Persons with Disability. Just imagine for a moment, in this world where everyone competes for the means way beyond their possibilities, what it feels like having a disability, which could weigh you down, which could bring down your, possibilities in the race of survival. Imagine what persons with disabilities would have gone through during this pandemic, which we've recently faced, where many well-to-do people were struggling for their survival. It is hard, isn't it? Just imagine some of these facts which I'm going to present to you. In India, which is such a big country with 1.3 billion population, an estimated 2.1% population has a disability. It's a small number, isn't it? But when we look at the actual number, it is a humbling figure of 26 million people, which could be more than the population of some countries in Europe per se. While disability is widely recognized by public, some are not, we only recognize when we see a stark reality, when we see somebody limping, when we see somebody having some short vision or a mental disability. But most of the times we forget to even attend to these needs per se. We sometimes only turn up and put up attention when we see our Olympic team, which is a Special Olympics team, has won more medals compared to our regular Olympics team. But I guess we need to see them a little more in general. Now, just imagine the investments in the disability sector are way below the desired. Look at some numbers, for example, CSR spends, which is one of the emerging possibilities. Of course, it can't replace the state investments, but just consider this as an example. CSR spends on health and education by far consumes about more than 60% of the total investments in this space. But disability figures way below, even less than 4 or 5% per se. Even if you look at, the kind of recognition disability has got so far is negligible. Very recently, Parliament expanded the number of disabilities covered under the law from 7 to 21. Our Constitution predominantly guarantees equality, freedom, justice, and dignity to all, which includes even persons with disabilities, but hardly they receive it. We hardly find suitable and inclusive provisions. For example, let's say even if it is in public infrastructure, such as even finding toilets for them, they really struggle always. Finding water access, all water tables or water sanitation points are higher than what they can stand for. These are not provision for them. Look at the public transport. It is not provision for catering to generally disabled in that case. Boarding and offboarding is generally a problem in that case. We might find seats for disabled which are reserved, but generally other provisions are missing. India itself strengthened its commitment with signing a note with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Persons with Disability in May 2008. It also, strengthened it further by providing, Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016, which I just referred to as well, where they also increased number of disabilities from 7 to 21, which also kind of raised the expectations for the lives of disabled people in India. Now, if we just look at, the goal of inclusiveness, it needs a radical shift in its perspectives, that of being an equal partners in the development and decision-making, or so to say, relishing the goals or relishing the fruits of development. Critically, the society has to make efforts to change the way people perceive this disability. We have to basically work towards an inclusive approach which attempts to basically destigmatize the disabilities. It also means that there should be adequate investments which could be not only made in the public space, but also by the other stakeholders like that of CSR, as I mentioned. I guess we need to have a relook on that basically how the distribution of those investments could be made and how the sinking of the government schemes as well as the CSR investments could be done as a demonstration model, and then the government could scale that up at a bigger scale, which could be really very impactful for the people with disabilities. You also made another good point was about awareness, which is the key. Certainly it is. I'm sure it's just a matter as the CSR space is evolving. We are in the beginning stages of the CSR Act being into provision. Initial a few years, I think it's just the initial part of the life cycle of being matured on that. I remember those conversations with some of the boards where the boards suggested that, look, can our Diwali Mela or our Dashera Mela be accounted for CSR? And now to these kind of conversations with the folks like yourselves and many like us here, things are suddenly changing, but it still has a long way to go. Quite like Ms. Roka also said that, look, when we compare ourselves to the West, and West basically has lots of provisions for, they're disabled and they treat them as a mainstream thing. And I have many colleagues across the globe where I see them playing a role despite having some or the other handicap in that case. And I guess, there are certain pointers, taking a summary of what you all said in very different ways, that if we make it more specific, or we say that, look, it's generalized, it's not going to work. It has to be specific response. It has to start from the initial level, from the schools, where either sign languages or Braille, even for that matter, could also be taught as part of the other sections of the languages we have. Why should there be only a craze about learning Japanese or learning French or learning Spanish? Why not these things, which are daily life skills for many of us? And I think, as Mr. Sethi also said in his conversations, that if we do not understand it, it's our fault, it's not their fault. And quite like Mr. Dubey, you also concluded while saying that, if we do not mainstream them, it's our loss end of the day, because if we are not going to bring these stakeholders at par, the things are only going to get difficult for most of these folks there. I guess counseling of parents, which was put up by Mr. Hota, putting up in the mainstream education institutions and putting these as languages of priorities, putting this up, some leadership picking it up, whether this is the political leadership or this is leadership at the boards level, including diversity, as Mr. Sethi said, as Mr. Jinsi said, that having specific views made about different types of disabilities and not treat them equal as all. And as Mr. Dubey, you said that if CSR were to walk the talk, they have to really include this. I think if I were to just sum up, I'm sorry, we are just running short on time. I would have loved to continue this, because I felt from my standpoint, 1 hour with 5 panelists is never enough. And I guess, as we started to warm up, it's time to close. So my apologies. I think it's imperative to say that if we do not accept PWDs as the equal stakeholders and beneficiaries of the development, so that we could reap the fruits equally of the development, and as a country, we would not be able to achieve what we are set out to do so. This surely needs creating more space for awareness, creating more space for sensitization, so that the moment people understand that it is important for them, because it can happen to anyone. And there is even a greater need to invest in innovative solutions. There is even a greater need of finding greater participation or mainstreaming in all spheres of operations or life, and finding more investments to create friendly infrastructure. I guess if we ignore this, we do it on our own perils itself. Thank you for being a lovely audience today. Thanks to all the panelists for sharing your valuable insights and perspectives. We leave you behind with these thoughts and action items to help invest more into this space, to lift people's lives from drudgery. It is our collective endeavor and a social responsibility. We sign off for now. Thank you very much.